All right. Well, welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Maybe it's the middle of the night where you are. My name is Michael Hebb, and I'm the founder of Death Over Dinner and EOL.community. And we're here for a very exciting panel discussion and live Q&A. It is a very important day. We have the National Children's Grief Awareness Day, and we're joined by our friends from the George Mark House. And just a little bit of background on EOL. EOL.community is a place that you can come, and that's the URL. You can find us. Many of you have already been there to register for this event. But EOL.community is dedicated to helping people find support when it comes to grief, when it comes to advanced care planning. Maybe you have a loved one in the ICU, or maybe you just are interested in these very, very important topics. And I'm going to turn it over to our special guest and co-host, Kathy Hull. And so Kathy is the founder and staff psychologist of the George Mark Children's House, which is the first freestanding pediatric palliative care center in the United States. And she has been active in clinical psychology for more than 30 years and has devoted the last 17 years of her professional life to developing and sustaining George Mark, as well as working with patients and their families. Kathy, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you. We're delighted to be part of this presentation today and to share the panel that our group of bereaved siblings did last week. And I am sitting in the great room at George Mark Children's House, which is a very special place. I wish all of you could see it someday for real, but I think what makes it most magical is that we're able to just wrap our arms around the families who come for the support that they need with a child who is chronically ill, with a very significant illness, needing end-of-life services, or respite care, which we do on a very regular basis. So we're proud to be part of this presentation today and looking forward to the Q&A afterwards. And this panel will be presenting itself again live at our summit at the end of March, and there's information about that on a slide that will be presented.
Terrific. And we'll share about this in the chat as well, so you know how to sign up for this incredible upcoming event. But without further ado, we're going to get on with our program. So just a quick note, the panel will start shortly, and then we'll be back live, Kathy, myself, and Brittany, to answer questions. And you can put a question in the chat at any time during the panel discussion or when we're doing the live Q&A. So let's roll this panel, and we'll see you all again very soon for the live Q&A.
We'll see.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us and tuning in today. I feel so honored to be sitting where I'm at amidst you wonderful people who, you know, I haven't known very long, but the connection we've made is something that I know will go beyond this panel today. I want to introduce myself. My name is Brittany Maldonado-Gosline. And my professional life, I am the Deputy Director and Co-Director of Grief Support at Jacob's Heart Children's Cancer Support Services in Watsonville, California. But my personal story is really what brings me here today, and that is my brother Corbin, who passed away from leukemia 8 years ago. He was 18 and the light of our lives. He was the youngest of a lot of siblings, and he kept us all on our toes. So that is why I get to sit here with these panelists and people and share with you and talk with you about some hard things regarding grief and loss as a sibling and the different processes that you go through, the different stories, And I know I can speak for all of us in that we are here to provide hope and guidance for providers and people that might be going through a personal journey that's similar. I know that that's all of our goals. So hopefully this sheds some light on all of you. And with that, I'd like to do some introductions with the panelists that are here today. And then after, we'll be going into discussion points, and it'll just be a fluid dialogue, and just like we're sitting in the living room. So I'll start with you. If you could talk about who you are a little bit, why you're here, and your loved one.
Hi, my name is Maddie Wolfing-Rich. I currently live in San Francisco and grew up in California. I'm here today on behalf of my brother Mark, who passed away in 1999 of a undiagnosed neurological disorder that we discovered a few weeks after he was born. And I was connected to George Mark through a foundation that my parents started shortly after Mark passed away, called the Markey Foundation, which is named after our nickname for him, Markey, which raises money for children's hospice organizations and foundations like George Mark. But I'm excited today to talk to everyone here about being a sibling and the experience that you go through. It's a lifetime thing, and it's really special to be able to talk to others who understand.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lexi Levine. I'm from Boston, Mass. And I'm here today on behalf of my younger brother, Barry. Barry was 16 when he passed away, and I was 19. At that time, we thought that he had an unspecified neurological condition. And now, as an adult, I actually work for Barry's former neurologist. And we together were able to find out that Barry had Jordan syndrome, or a mutation in the PPP2R5D gene, which he was only the 109th person to be diagnosed with at that time. And I'm really excited to be here as well and to talk to other bereaved siblings.
Hi, my name is Justin Newell. I'm from Oakland, California, and grew up in Northern California. I'm here because of my youngest brother, Nigel, who passed away here at the George Mark Children's House. This house has brought so many families together and has provided so much support. And I'm really excited to reach out and to share my experience and to talk with our fellow panelists about our unique experiences and to hopefully help others in the future.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Crookshank, and I am here because of my sister, Amanda Caitlin Crookshank. I was given this opportunity through Jacob's Heart, and I am grateful to be here amongst these other panelists.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dennis Kobos. I'm here on behalf of David Kobos, my brother. He was in George Mark some 10 plus years ago. My brother had cerebral palsy, and when he was 18, he had some complications with his lungs, which led him to passing away Christmas Day of 2011. And I'm here really to share my experience and help others that might be in the same path that I was, and of course, share this panel with this incredible group of people.
Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. We're going to get right into it and just hang out for the next hour or so. I think we all know grief's a bit of a wave, so you never know what to expect and what's going to come up in the moment. So we're just going to ride that wave together today, and wherever it takes us, and have a discussion. One of the discussion points that we wanted to talk about was, how did you first learn of your sibling's diagnosis? So whoever wants to go and kind of start us off.
I can go first. So it was a little bit of an unusual story for my family. When Barry was first born, he went home from the hospital thinking he was a normal baby. And then about 6 months into his life, he got a pretty bad cold. And, I had gone through the whole family, and everybody else was able to recover in just a couple of weeks. And he was still pretty ill about a month into it. So after a few doctor's appointments and, pediatricians trying to assure my mom everything was fine, one night he spiked a really high fever and was rushed to Children's Hospital. And, after they got the initial pneumonia and everything like that under control, they kind of sat my mom down and said that this was not a normal baby and that they weren't really sure what was exactly wrong, but they knew it was bad and that we need to start seeing all sorts of doctors, starting with a neurologist and a geneticist. And so we found out that Barry was having lots of seizures, up to like 30 a day. So that was like his primary problem at first, but we still could not identify an underlying cause. And at that time in 1998, we were told that we might never have an answer. And then as he grew up, the genetic testing got more sophisticated and, we got closer and we thought we would have the answer, but it actually took until after he passed away and me doing a little bit of research to find out that he actually had Jordan syndrome.
I can share a little bit about sort of what I remember when we learned about Nigel's condition. So Nigel was diagnosed with Kearns-Sayre syndrome, which is a mitochondrial disorder. And the person who actually diagnosed him was my mom. So my mom's a pediatrician. Nigel was 6 years younger than me. So kind of growing up, we noticed things where he, wasn't catching up. He was a little bit slower, wasn't growing as quickly as he should, or hitting the benchmarks that he should be hitting. And that, of course, as a pediatrician and as a mom, concerned my mother. And she did more research, did genetic testing, consulted with specialists, and was able to find the diagnosis. And it's a very unique circumstances. Not everyone's parents are providers and primary providers at that. And I think for Nigel, he had the perfect mom to be able to take care of him. And for me, it was something that was pretty upfront. My mom's very pragmatic, and I think that's as a provider you kind of have to be, and to be able to be kind of straightforward, but also looking back as a mother and to kind of know the trajectory of what these diseases might kind of lead to, and the difficulty of life because of that. I just empathize with her in terms of that. But as a sibling, she kind of tried to be as upfront and forward with the things that we should expect for his treatment and how life will be until he passed.
How did you feel about that? Like with her being upfront, did you feel included? Was that supportive to you? Yeah. I think that was very unique in the fact that, she had pretty much all the answers until there were none at the end, and that sort of gave us solace in sort of preparing ourselves as much as we could, and to sort of understand and cherish the time that we had with Nigel. Of course, there were details, as a 12-year-old when we learned about it, when I was 12 when he was diagnosed, and the scientific details and all of the the medical terminology and things that, of course, were brought down to more simpler terms. But as I grew up and went through high school, learned a little bit more about biology. Google was there, so doing more Google searches and learning a little bit more, and of course, just trying to understand. And for me, it's like I'm the type of person that always wants an answer and always wants a solution to something. And unfortunately, with that case, it wasn't. There was no cure, no solution. Just kind of therapeutic management and management of symptoms as they came along.
I can go next.
Yeah.
So I am the youngest of three. So actually both of my siblings, Amanda and my older brother, Brandon, they have cerebral palsy. So the diagnosis was kind of always there from birth and even from my birth. But Amanda was more severe and was wheelchair bound. And from birth, she actually wasn't expected to live more than a few months. And she spent probably like the first year of her life in the ICU. My parents always taking turns and shifts and whatnot to take care of her and learn like her diagnosis and how severe it was. So yeah, but that was my experience with it. So I kind of always knew.
It was always a part of your life,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah,
Mhm.
which was part of the reason why it makes this so special.
Mhm. Yeah.
I can go next.
Mhm.
I had a similar experience to that as well. I'm 2.5 years older than my brother Mark. And so life with him not being well, just that's what it was. I don't remember a lot of that time being so young, but I don't remember him ever being well. And that's partially because I think my mom and dad used me as a benchmark to him, because when you have a baby come home from the hospital and who's not eating and really jerky and having seizures, and they didn't know what was going on, especially after 2 years before when I was a baby, none of these things were happening. So I think that's kind of how they first started to think, okay, what's going on here? And started down the path of, let's go to the doctor, and many neurologists and many tests and et cetera later. That's how they kind of came to find out. But yeah, it's definitely been something that I've had to learn about over the course of my life. What actually was happening as a kid, you can only understand things in little kid terms, and as you grow up, it's almost been like putting together the puzzle pieces and really understanding what was going on. And for us and our family, we don't have all the answers still, because it was an undiagnosed disorder that still hasn't been diagnosed. And so I think there's still a little bit of sadness around that too, but that's it's definitely been something that we've processed over the years.
I feel like it's very interesting that you say it's like a puzzle, because even with like cerebral palsy, which is more common, it still feels like, as Amanda was growing up, right, new specialists, new providers, new things that she had to do. And it was like we had to put this puzzle together, but as we were building it. So I can kind of relate. Yeah,
Definitely.
For me, I was 3 years old, almost 4, when my brother was born. He was born in '93. And soon after he was born, he had a lot of complications as a newborn. He spent about a month in the hospital. And by the way, he was born in Guatemala, where my family is from. And you can imagine at that time, back in the early 90s, anything that had to do with these conditions in Latin American countries was very, very limited. So, as I don't remember anything really, because I was 3 years old, but stories that my parents tell me is, he was in the hospital for over a month, and it was extremely difficult for them. And me as a 3-year-old wanting to be with my newborn brother and being able to interact with him, I didn't get the chance to do that. And I kept asking if I could see him, if I could play with him, all these normal 3-year-old questions. But and it was very difficult for my parents not understanding what was happening, but also not necessarily having, at that point, the medical providers being able to give them so much information to really grasp what was happening. So it was a little bit of piecing everything together for my parents little by little with the limited resources that were available at that point.
Yeah, that kind of goes into the next discussion point. Thanks, Dennis, to kind of tee that off around decisions made for your siblings. Is do you feel like you had a voice? How do you feel about the decisions that were made for your siblings? And did you feel welcomed in the process? And, I know, as you said, like you put puzzle pieces together, so it could be over time, like as you got older, were you more involved? And, just what does that feel like to you? Were you involved in those decisions? Yeah.
Personally, when it came down to medical decisions, I wasn't a part of it. And I think that was my parents trying to protect me. But I was never really given the option or even asked about it. There's like times where I remember going to doctor's visits with Amanda, and she'd be having to get like Botox because her legs are so tight or her arms are tight or whatnot to release them. But I never got to say, like, you know, she doesn't like this. She cries because of this. You know, it's painful for her. But in reality, you know, it was our parents' decisions to do that because it was helpful for her in the long run. But I was never given that option, nor was my brother. But I think it was my parents doing that out of the goodness of their heart.
Yeah, something that I can relate to was for my brother. He has cerebral palsy as well. When we were in Guatemala, mid 90s, he had some physical therapy where I remember they literally hung his hands onto like a bar to try to make his arms stretch out. And that was really painful for him, and he would cry. And as a 5-6-year-old, I would run because I didn't like seeing my brother cry. Yeah. And I vividly remember that. And even I think my parents have a home video of where they were recording the therapy, and just seeing that brings back so much of those memories, and wanting to take that away from him, because I never liked seeing my brother in any type of discomfort or pain.
Yeah, definitely. I can relate to that. Whenever my brother Barry would come home every day from school, he would have on his spinal body jacket, and he used to hate that thing. So the first thing I would do would be just to rip it off of him, and then he would start like scratching himself, and I would just try to help him get in there, But I guess I had a little bit of a different experience in general. I always wanted to be really involved with my brother's care and all the decision making, and I also want to go to medical school, so there's a little bit tied into that. But from the time I was like maybe 10 years old, I was like always trying to research treatments and stuff like that. And then once I got a little bit older, actually, like sometimes they would get incorporated. So like, for example, I proposed at giving seizure medications into the cheek, like when he was in a crisis and stuff like that. And we actually did try that after. So at times I felt really empowered by our medical team, and they really did allow me to participate in discussions, and I really got to make some decisions. And then other times I didn't really have that experience. And I can remember one in particular. This was probably like right at the beginning of Barry's like full initial decline. He was about 14, and he had spent about 2 months in and out of the hospital. And the most recent kind of event was that right on Christmas Day, and this was about a week after he had a grand mal seizure, and his oxygen had gone below 40, and they didn't know if he was going to make it. So at that time, we realized that we couldn't necessarily give him the kind of care he was receiving at the hospital at home. But we didn't know how else to bring him out of the hospital. So they called a family meeting, and I didn't know it at the time, but this was going to be kind of the discussion about moving him to a pediatric nursing home. No one warned me about this because everybody knew I was very against this. I felt like if we let my brother go to a nursing home, then we were giving up on him. And so I remember it vividly, sitting in front of a room full of world-class doctors. Like some of them had to stand. There were so many people in there. My sister from Pennsylvania was conference called in. And I remember every single doctor went around and said why, from their perspective, it would be best for my brother to go to the nursing home. And I just remember sitting there, not being able to say anything because I was so upset. And finally, at the very end of the meeting, they said, "Lexi, you've been very quiet." And so I just spoke up and I said, like, if you want my brother to do something, tell him he can't, and he will show you. So they were saying at that time he had 6 months to live. And I did lose that fight. He did go to the pediatric nursing home, but he also did prove them wrong, and he lived for 2 more years. And in those times, it was some of the best memories we had with him. He had to make a wish. He had all of these amazing events. And I realize now in retrospect that I think I was very lucky because my family really gave me the autonomy to participate in these decisions as much as I could. And then at 16 years old, my head could not get over what my heart was saying. And at that time, I just wanted Barry home with me. And I could not understand that that was what was best for him. I'm very lucky that my family and all the doctors did understand that that was what he was needed, or else he would never have been able to come home for my high school graduation and participate in that. And as you can see, he was having a great day. And so I'm very thankful that one time I didn't really get to, participate in the decision fully.
Yeah, I think I have a little bit of a more unique perspective. As I mentioned, I put a lot of trust in, the decisions that my parents and of course my mom made as a medical professional, as a mother. So, in terms of involvement of, decisions of, the treatments, I think everything was maximized. And I think that was such a blessing, just because I knew that they were doing as much as they could to make sure that Nigel was healthy and that, that he was comfortable, and, that we kind of tackled every challenges that, sort of manifested and sort of, shown. So, I don't remember being as involved in terms of decision making. I was involved in terms of like helping out my dad, because my dad was a stay-at-home dad and his full-time caretaker, which is also a very unique experience in itself. But I did put a lot of trust in sort of the decisions that they made, and I knew that it was, the best, for the best outcome.
Mm-hmm. You felt included.
Yeah, I felt included, and they were very truthful about what was next, and the appointments and the outcome of appointments, and what the specialists were saying, and the progression of his endocrinologist, and the progression of his disease, and what treatments would have to be incorporated, introducing hearing aids, him getting a pacemaker, and of course, kind of the educational aspect too, because he was going to school until maybe 1 or 2 years before he had passed. So, all of that inclusion in terms of the support that he needed. I was included in terms of, them letting me know, but of course, I think it was also, they wanted me and my younger brother, Ian. So we're 3 brothers, to kind of do what we could do in terms of, living our life and doing all the activities that we could, which if we're going to talk about this later, but, the guilt behind that. But it's, in terms of decision making, it's something that we were as informed as we could have been.
Sorry, go ahead, Maddie.
I was just going to say that I really resonate with that, because I was so young when these decisions were being made, and I, it wouldn't have made sense for a 2 or 3-year-old to be weighing in on medical decisions. So I've as I've come to understand what was going on, I've found like, wow, my parents used all the resources that they had to make every decision that they did, and be able to spend as much time with Mark, especially towards the end of his life. We were able to move him to home in hospice, and that was a game changer for our family to be able to be in our home. Mm-hmm. But I think now that I've reached the age that my parents were at that time, it's almost mind-blowing to me to think, wow, they were doing that. And, it's crazy to think about that. But I think too, they prioritized me as a child, and being able to do, be a 3-year-old, have play dates, and, live life like a normal 3-year-old as much as possible. And I appreciate that decision immensely. And like I said, now that I'm at that age that they were, I appreciate it even more. It's an impossible position to be in.
Especially knowing how much effort it takes, to take care of our siblings, and also us and other siblings who don't have the same needs.
Exactly.
I would say the same thing. My parents did the same thing. They tried to make the most normal, quote unquote, childhood for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like Justin brought up one like good important difference. Like I heard in our experiences, like because my brother was only 2 years younger than me, I wasn't school aged yet when he was first like going through the diagnostic process. So I would go along to all the appointments, and I like to describe myself as the healthy control at that time, because they had like the perfect like data set to compare everything to. So I can remember being at the geneticist and then measuring Barry's head circumference, and then going to my head circumference, and like Barry doing the eye test, and then I do the eye test. And like, I can really like just picture the eye charts like that from that young age and stuff. So in some ways I didn't really have a choice. Like I was kind of thrown into it. And then I am thankful my mom also did really try to give me that normal childhood experience. So like we first got introduced to respite care. So she once a week could have just a day with me, because as the youngest, like my older two sisters had years with her before my brother was born, whereas I was so young. So she wanted to make sure like I still got the normal child experience. And then as I continued to grow up as this kind of like healthy control, it was like my choice. I wanted to be like so heavily involved. And I don't know if it's because I had been my whole life or what, but I guess like I kind of like made that decision for myself at that point.
You were supported in that decision, it
Mhm.
sounded like.
Mhm.
Yeah. Did any of you ever feel like because of a lack of information, you had limited involvement, maybe in a way that you wanted more information, but whether it be like with the, providers that you didn't have that information, or your parents, did that ever limit you? Or did you want more?
Definitely. I feel
Yeah.
like having an undiagnosed syndrome, like we only had no answers. Like that was the only answer they could give us. Like, they never knew how long Barry was going to live. They never knew if a treatment was going to work. They never knew anything. So I can remember feeling like very frustrated with providers for like not knowing the answers. And like, I remember this like one instance when my brother had been inpatient for quite a bit of time, and I felt like they were just waiting for him to have another seizure to kind of like collect the data and be able to use that and go forward. And so one day the poor neurologist on call, she had no idea what she was signing up for, but I had led my pack of sisters into battle, and we were prepared to confront her to figure out what her treatment plan was going to be and make sure it was up to our par and everything. And she actually got like pretty emotional and began to cry. And my mom, of course, apologized and everything. And she said like, no, like if this was me and my children, like I would want them to be doing this for each other. And like, I think that was like a piece of like normalcy for me. Like I was acting like a normal sister, like protecting my younger brother, that kind of thing. So definitely always wanted more information.
I was like that too.
Yeah.
It's the feisty sister. I love how you put that though. Like you're being a normal sister, you're advocating for your sibling, and you all have done that in different ways, different ages, different times.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if I would ever say that I felt like I needed more information. I always just felt like this was my life. And this is how it goes. And like there's little changes here and there, but it was all I knew. So, but I feel like my parents did the best to communicate what the doctors were telling them. And so I felt like I was always in the know, even though I didn't feel like I necessarily got the option to pick or to provide info or anything like that. But I felt like I knew everything that I needed to know. So, what about you?
I think for me, I remember I felt in the dark a lot as I was, getting into early teenage years. And I remember specifically one time when my parents, I guess, broke the news that my brother was never going to be able to get better. Because I always held a certain hope that he would be able to, become a quote unquote normal kid and be able to play with me. And I remember that moment very specifically because that hurt me so much that after that, my parents actually told me the truth about everything, about his diagnosis, everything that was going on with him and his medical checkups and just everything that had to do with him. Because before I felt like they were trying to shield me from reality. But when that moment happened, I think they realized that that wasn't in my benefit and I needed to know the actual truth.
Yeah, it's a hard line. I think as a parent, I don't know, you guys all have the different experiences with it too. I think I was a little bit older, so I definitely pushed for information and wanted more, I wanted to be in every discussion, So yeah, but if it's okay, I wanted to kind of touch on something you brought up, Justin, with that is I know in my own experience, I replay things a lot, like information that I was given and my involvement and things that maybe I advocated for or didn't advocate for. And you brought up the word guilt, like this sense of kind of guilt with that. I don't know if you guys want to speak to that at all? I definitely experienced that in a way.
I think it was a more so for me, guilt in terms of, why am I healthy and why is my brother healthy and why is he not? Why is this happening? And then of course, growing up and mentioning that, our parents, did their best to be able to have us, maximize the time with, our extracurricular activities, with our studies and, going off to college. It's there's guilt in terms of, I wish Nigel could have done those things. Why is this happening to him? And there's also guilt of, I'm having so much fun and I'm experiencing, these different moments in my life. I'm, graduating high school, graduating college, and, just all the experiences in between and seeing that type of growth. Whereas, he's sort of, he's at home. He can't do any of these things. He, has a hearing impairment. He's blind. He has mobility issues. And my dad, of course, as I mentioned, is caretaker. Is home 24/7 taking care of him. So, is there more that I can do? Those are questions that I ask myself as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the tough questions. Mm-hmm.
I think guilt, it's like it looks so differently for everyone, because I felt very much like you felt like, we are so blessed, right? We can walk, we can talk, we can see, we can hear, we have full functioning bodies. But then at the same time, growing up, being the youngest, I was selfish and was like, why can't I have normal siblings? Like, I want to play with my sister like other kids, and so there's always guilt for that as well, like, and it is selfish. It's like a why me kind of thing, because it's like, I want to be able to go and do those things with her. I want to paint her nails. I want her to paint my nails. I want sleepovers, things like that. Even just being able to have one-on-one conversation, because my sister was nonverbal. I never had that, opportunity. And so there's guilt when I feel like, why me? Because then at the same time, I am so blessed and so thankful, because it's like, I am me because of my sibling. And I am the person that I am today. I'm doing what I'm doing because of my siblings. So there's guilt on both sides.
I definitely felt that like guilt related to like wanting to feel normal. Like I can remember like as a kid, like just being so hyper aware of how abnormal our family was. Like we had like a wheelchair van, and I just felt like that was just like the stamp of abnormality. Like everywhere we went, like those were the Levines in the wheelchair van. Like everybody knew us by the stupid wheelchair van. And like I just wanted, like we didn't have like bucket seats because that's where the wheelchair went. And so like it felt like you were a mile away if you were in the back row. And I used to hate having to pick up friends. Like I just thought that they would think that was so weird and stuff. And like those are the kinds of ways I feel guilt. And like I have a winter birthday, so a lot of times Barry would get sick right before my birthday party, and it would have to get canceled last minute. And I can remember like this weird like guilt, regret type feeling that would like muster up inside me. Like I knew I wasn't supposed to be upset with Barry, but I knew I was upset and that my upsetness was valid, but like I didn't know how to express that in a way that wouldn't look like me being like a healthy, able-bodied child upset that my birthday party got canceled because my brother was in the hospital. So yeah.
Definitely. I felt that as well, the guilt for being guilty. And it's like for me, I remember there was a period of my life when I was around 9 years old, 9 or 10, where I was just so guilty for like even being alive and being fine. And then like feeling bad about that, because I should be appreciating that I was alive and able to do anything and walk and go to school and all the things I was complaining about. And that's a hard, such a complex thing to confront as a 10-year-old when you're probably not ready to understand even like the existential questions, let alone your own complex feelings. So I definitely understand everything that you guys are saying.
Yeah, for me, it was similar in feeling guilty for possibly not wanting to bring friends around the house because they would find things weird or judge certain things, right? Or maybe not wanting them to see my brother and make fun of him, right? So for me, I carried that, and it made me feel very guilty for not wanting to just show off my brother in a way, right? And also to, the points that have been made, feeling guilty for being able to do everything that my brother couldn't do. He was in a wheelchair, he couldn't move, he couldn't do anything for himself. So I always wanted to make up for him, and whatever I did, I always made sure that I was mentally doing it for two people. And that's something that I carry up to this day. Everything that I do is for him as well. So that guilt transformed into something that now motivates me. But back then it was, as a teenager, it was really difficult to handle and difficult to then translate into something more productive.
I would say I still feel guilt every day, and it's been years since she's passed. And so it's I don't know if it ever really goes away. I don't feel like it does. I feel like there's days where I have good guilt, and then there's days where I have bad guilt, where I feel selfish. But I still feel at least in the back of my mind, why didn't I do this? Or did I tell her that I loved her? Or did I hug her one more time? Why did I not? Did I do that? And so it's also part of memory thing. What does she remember me as? And sometimes I feel guilty because I'm maybe she remembers me as being a mean sister, or, I don't know.
Yeah.
Grief, guilt is grief. So much of what you guys are all saying, and I'm resonating, it's those guilty questions, and it's you're grieving almost that you are healthy. You're grieving that you do want to play with your sister and you can't. It's it's the process of grief. Sorry, Dennis, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say that it's just similar for me in thinking back and the things that I could have done, or the opportunities that I had in front of me that I didn't take at that point in time, that now I wish I could go back and change what happened.
I think for me, that's one piece of guilt I maybe what you were saying, Lizzie, I don't have, because there was this big unknown about Barry's illness, and we never knew how long he was going to be here. I do feel I always made sure I hugged and kissed him and said I love you, no matter what. When I was describing his process of coming home from school, this never happened when me and my sisters would come home from school, but when he would come home, it would be a whole family affair going over and making over him, we're so happy to see you kind of thing, because we really didn't know if that would be the last day he came home from school or something. Anything could have happened on the bus, and so I think when I find myself kind of in a guilt spiral, wondering if I did enough, if I said enough, everything like that, those are the things I try to hold on to, and remind myself that I would get yelled at because if he was staying home from school for some reason, I would still go wake him up and say goodbye, I love you, before I left for school, that kind of thing. So I try to remind myself that as a young person, I possibly, and I'm sure you guys did too, as much as you possibly could have done.
That's good encouragement, Lexi. Well, this kind of ties into some things that Dennis kind of mentioned about friends, bringing friends over, kind of speaks into those relationships with friends, with families, cousins, whatever that's defined for you. Did anybody let you down at during the process of your siblings' end of life or after they died? And if you guys want to talk about that, however you want to talk about it, but who let you down, if anybody, and what did that feel like? What was that process?
I definitely had friends that let me down. Amanda passed away when I was in college, and I had a big group of friends, and it was unexpected. And that's also part of my grief, is because my parents will say that it's one thing and I experienced a different thing. So her cause of death or end of life, is still unknown, at least in my eyes. And so when that happened, I was in college and I had actually gone home for spring break. And so I was around all of my friends, and family was all home and whatnot. And so when it happened, like, what do you say? What do you do? It was out of the blue. It wasn't really necessarily her medical condition. But I guess it shocked people or whatnot. But I had friends that I was very close to, that just kind of like completely dropped off the place, like the face of the earth. And like they didn't say anything, or they didn't know what to say. But at that time, I was so deeply hurt, because I'm like, you guys are my best friends. Like, you're supposed to be here for me. And they weren't. They ignored me in the halls. And like, it was like I was a stranger to them. And so from being very close to someone, almost familiar, to almost a ghost, was very difficult for me. But I had family around, which I was thankful for. That hurt though.
I think similar for me, it showed me who true friends were and which friends were not such true friends. I think my personal experience, my personal story was, it was a little unexpected what happened to my brother as well. It was just, a simple cold that rapidly transformed into something very, very serious within a matter of days. But I myself was also going through my own battle, because I had been diagnosed with cancer and I had just finished my first round of chemotherapy. So it was so much going on for me personally. And when it happened with my brother, I told my group of friends, but their reaction wasn't necessarily what I was expecting. It was just very dry, I would say. And when that happened, it just hit me. And I said, wow, I don't think I have a very core group of friends who can support me in everything that's going on in my life right now. And I just need to rely on my family for the support that I need right now. So it was very disappointing. It hurt. And it made me reevaluate what I valued in a friendship after that.
I definitely agree with that. I feel like this is something me and my sisters actually disagree about a little bit. Like, I sometimes will be talking about someone and I'll reference like how they handled my brother's death as kind of like a, I don't know, like a litmus for like how I feel about them almost. And I feel like that's appropriate because my brother's death was one of the most important things that have happened to me. So if you can't be there by the good important things or the bad important things, like, you can't be there for the good if you're not going to be there for the bad kind of thing. And I feel like immediately surrounding the death, I was very well supported and everything like that. But I think for me, my disappointment more came in like the weeks after, when like I would have liked to talk about memories about Barry, like even happily, like I was in college too. And I had just started college and people didn't know Barry. So like I would have liked to let them know Barry and like tell them a few stories like here or there, like if something popped into my head, but I never felt comfortable to because nobody ever asked me about it. So to me, that said they didn't want to hear about it and that they thought it was like sad and that kind of thing. So I felt like if I was going to bring up like my dead brother, then I would be bringing down the room kind of thing. So I never really felt like that space was like created for me.
What you said, litmus test, really resonates with me because I remember when I was younger feeling like nobody could really understand me or really truly be my friend without knowing the side of me, which was hard to talk about. And a lot of times when it did come up, the reactions were like it would bring down the room, which of course nobody wants to do that. Or it would be, well, that happened a long time ago. So how could it still be such a impactful thing to you now? And that minimization of my experiences has hurt friendships and kind of made me realize I can never be as close to you as I would want to be. And I'm, I want to share this side of me. I want to share the good and the bad, like you said. But some of the closest people, unfortunately, do understand it from personal experience. But yeah, it's hard. It's definitely the litmus test. And I think my family would agree with that too. It's kind of like the barrier you have to get over. But you can't really, I feel like you can't really know me without knowing that side of me, because it's been so impactful to every part of my life.
Yeah. And just because they're not here now, or it's been a long time, it doesn't mean that they're not still that person. It doesn't mean that they're not your sibling. And it doesn't mean that those feelings and that hole and, everything encompassed in that is lesser than just because of time. I mean, I feel like it gets easier to talk about Amanda as time goes on and as I share those memories. But I mean,
it's interesting how time and grief don't seem to run in parallel paths, because it's been over 20 years since Mark passed away, and I've gone through periods of my life where his birthday will pass and it'll just be another day, and my family still celebrates it as if he were here. But it's easier some years, and other years you feel like he turned 21 last year, and it's like, what could have been? We could have had his 21st birthday, and that's it makes it a little bit harder. And I've watched my parents and their grief take different forms and different, as time has gone on, different years too, and it doesn't always line up with each other. And yeah, it's a weird thing to be okay sometimes and really hurt other times, and in a lot of pain.
it's just like the whole is not lesser.
Yeah.
It comes and goes, grief comes and goes, but the whole in that person is not lesser because of time.
I think that almost like proves the point, like how grief is not like a straight path, like you were saying, like the fact that sometimes I can just barely get berry out of my mouth and like already be crying, and like I have no rhyme or reason as to why. Like some days, like it could just be a regular Tuesday, not his birthday, not like the month that he passed away, like just a regular Tuesday, and I like can't get out of my own way, like, and talk about him. But other times, like today, I've held it together pretty well. And we still got time though. But there's just never knowing like how it's going to affect me that day.
Especially
No, go ahead, Justin.
Oh, yeah. I mean, especially in our grief journey, it's different, or the length of time is different for each one of us, and just kind of seeing, or like I think it all comes with like experience and preparation and like kind of where you're at, because I think we had talked about this in terms of our identities of our bereaved siblings, and how we kind of, it's part of our identities as those that are here today, and we can't be ourselves without mentioning or kind of alluding to the impact that our siblings have made on us, and the decisions that we've made, and how much we've grown in the years that they have passed. So yeah, I mean, it ebbs and flows. Like I'm sure, as you look back, my experience is that sometimes I, see that, Nigel is 25. He would have been 25, and 25. Am I doing my math right? 98, 2021, 23, 23, and just seeing, like comparing and contrasting, like it's hard to not do that. Like he would have been either in grad school, or starting his career, or doing the things that we did. But obviously that's like an alternative reality, and kind of seeing those different elements is it's just something that we go through in our grief journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, milestones for sure. What were you gonna say, Dennis?
Yeah, I was gonna add, varies every single year and even month or day. Even on a random day, I can be browsing through Facebook and I run into a video that is of a child with cerebral palsy that reminds me so much of my brother, and I just start crying right away. It's just on command. And I'm not the person who cries very often, but it's just anything that reminds me of my brother. That's my weak point. And that's where all my emotions just come out, and I just start crying because I remember him and I miss him so much. And for his birthdays too, one year it can be very happy, and the next year it could be very sad. And also tying it back with guilt, just the day that he passed away on Christmas Day is just a day that will always be different for my family. But some years when maybe I don't feel as sad as I think I should feel, I feel guilty, but I also remind myself that it's just my own personal experience and remembering all the good things that happened with my brother. And it doesn't always have to be bad memories or just me crying the entire day.
Mm. Yeah, I think that, everybody's spoken to grief waves, right? Like we hear that all the time, but it's so true. Like, I know a friend of mine who went through a really difficult loss, similar to when I lost my brother. We called it the spoon moment because she pulled a drawer open and saw a spoon, and something about the spoon just triggered her. And so from that point on, sometimes different things can hit us, and we both always just call it's a spoon moment, but it's not about the spoon, right? It's about something else. And it's hard. Milestones, the birthdays, we're moving on in our lives, and keeping their memory there and them not being there is hard. Is there anything, I think, one of the last questions, I'll kind of tie them together, is about triggers, like kind of are all speaking to that, but if there are things or words that trigger you, and then after you talk about that, I'd like to maybe talk about what also gives you hope.
Some triggers or things that come up or that remind me of Nigel are the song "You Are My Sunshine," and then Yellow Legos. For some reason, he resonated towards Yellow Legos, but for me, those triggers just kind of are reminders, of him, and I kind of see it as him reminding me that he's still there, like in spirit, and just a quick reality check on perspective and just remembrance.
My mom used to always sing that song to Amanda. She'd cradle her, be rocking her, and always sing that song. So that's very nice. I remember, I have triggers from like PTSD, but positive triggers. I always remember Amanda by Butterflies. So whenever I see one, that's kind of like my glimpse of like hope, or my glimpse of Amanda. And those are always, and it's always like certain times where, it's like a spoon moment. You just kind of need it. So big yellow butterflies.
Yeah, I definitely have both the good and the bad ones. Like I feel like I was like really sensitive to like the word like died at first. Like I like could not say like bury and died in the same sentence for like 2 years after he passed away. Like I could only say passed away for some reason. I don't know why. And like same with like the phrase like rest in peace. Like I feel like it's very like overused and incorrectly used now. And so that was also very triggering to me to like see on the internet people be like rip when it's like about like something silly and not like about actually someone passing away. Just like I just felt like you don't even understand like what that can really mean. But then positive triggers, I would say anything orange flavored because that was Barry's favorite. So every year on his birthday, I celebrate with creamsicles and orange soda and country music. That was always his favorite too. Of course, Lee Bryce did a Make-A-Wish for him. So anytime I hear one of those songs, that could definitely get me going.
Yeah, positive triggers for me. I mean, similar to what I just shared, anytime I see a video or even another child that has the same condition that my brother had, it just brings such positive feelings. And, you know, at the same time, I feel a little sad, but it's always good memories. And, you know, similar to you, Lexi, my brother had Make-A-Wish as well. We went to Disney World. So anytime I hear Disney World or Disney anything, it reminds me so much of my brother, because that was, yeah, that pillow. That was such an awesome memory, because that was the first time that we had ever heard him actually laugh out loud. Like literally when you imagine someone laughing out loud, that was him. And that was the first time we had ever seen him do that. So that was such a, you know, good memory for my family and myself. And, you know, any negative triggers, I think for me, is just whenever I'm out and similar, I see another family that has a child with the same condition of my brother, and then I might see someone else across the room looking at him or her, just staring. I get very angry and want to say something, but of course I control myself. But that's like a trigger for me, is like someone looking at a person like that in a negative way.
I feel the same way, because when I see, I don't know if it's judgment or confusion or what exactly it is, but the first thought that comes in my head is, well, that's what Mark would have been like. And it's almost like a defensive, protective feeling that comes for me. That's definitely one of my negatives. But on the same note as you, Disney movies were one of Mark's favorite. And he was little, he was 4 months old, but it was the one time his nurses would always tell my parents, we put on a Disney movie, and he was very peaceful. He loved Hercules. So that's, whenever I'm thinking of him, I watch a Disney movie, and it's very comforting to me too.
Yeah, all those little triggers, negative, positive, you know, I think like what you said, the butterflies, those signs, the Legos, the orange flavored anything, you know, Disney. It's like they do give us that hope feeling. Or do you guys resonate, or just that inner peace, like it's like glimpses of them and their spirit living on? Yeah. I feel like this conversation could go on forever and ever and ever, and it should go on forever and ever, but we are going to come to a close. So with that, I know that we all agreed, and it would be super special to each of us if this was dedicated to our siblings. And so if, you know, Maddie, I'll start with you again to dedicate this to your sibling, and anything else that you want to close with, any like hope you'd maybe give someone else that's in a similar journey. And then after that, I'll say a couple things, and we'll be done for now.
Yeah, so I'd like to dedicate this to Mark, specifically thanking him for coming to this earth, because despite the fact that we wish he was with us, he's changed a lot of lives through, my family's life. A lot of good has come out of him being part of our family. Now I have 7 other siblings who are younger than both of us, and so there's a lot of love in our family. And then as well, my parents started a foundation in his memory to keep him alive, and it's been awesome to see all the good that's come out of that, with Mark kind of being the little guy behind it all. And then the last thing I'll say is, what gives me the most hope is this exactly, talking about it. My parents made sure that the conversation was always open, even if it wasn't going to be easy. And so to other siblings, I would encourage them to ask the hard questions and act when you feel like you need to act, because burying it's only going to make it worse. And it, even though it can be hard, it can also be good in a lot of ways too.
I would also like to dedicate this to my brother Barry. I would also like to sincerely thank him for sharing his short but 16 years with me and teaching me what life is about way before most people get to learn it. Setting me up for this amazing career that I have been so fortunate to get such a head start on because of him and all that he taught me. What gives me the most hope is that I get to carry on his story and participate in his disease organization and use his story to help inform the other families who have this disease in their family. And I also get to participate as a family member on their virtual lab meetings, and I get to help, work to develop treatments for these children. So hopefully Barry will be one of the only who didn't get to live a full life. And that's what really gives me hope.
I would like to dedicate this in honor of Nigel, who, as tough as it is being in this space where he passed, it is a healing space. And of course, thank Nigel for, we always say, healing our family. He was the bedrock of a lot of good things that had happened after he left us, but also, providing us, the best memories and touching every single person that I knew, that my parents knew, that my brother Ian knew, and being a good friend to them. And that's something we look fondly on. What gives me hope is, for us here today to be able to provide support, to everyone out there. You aren't alone. If you're a bereaved sibling, to parents, please involve the siblings in, your family's care and the care plans, and just involve them as much as they can, because I think that involvement really helped me in my grief journey and really reflecting back on all the times that I was able to have with Nigel. So, thank you.
Yeah. And I would like to dedicate this to Amanda and to my brother Brandon. They have both taught me so much. I would also like to dedicate this to George Marks and Scribbles and Giggles and any foundation who works with children and families in subacute care or who need subacute care. But my hope is that people will still carry on this conversation. Siblings can carry on this conversation. Siblings and families also go to therapy as well. So that's my hope.
I dedicate this to my brother David, who was my only sibling, my best friend growing up. I was very fortunate to have him for 18 years of my life. He taught me so much without ever saying a single word to me. He was my biggest inspiration, my biggest teacher. And up until he passed away, I feel like he sacrificed himself for me. So I'm always indebted to him and everything that he did while he was with me physically. But every day he continues to give me something in return. I always carry his memory, and my hope, or the hope is that, what gives me hope is knowing that there are others like me, such as all of you guys, and I feel understood for the first time. So other siblings that are similar to us, there are others out there like you that understand you without you having to go into detail about everything. And you're not alone. And parents, providers, involved siblings, they care as much as anyone and want to be involved, even if they can't say it or they don't say it.
Thank you all. And I would like to dedicate this to my brother Corbin, who just reminded me to make it count and live hard. And I have his fingerprint with me today, and he's with me always. I think what gives me hope is conversations like this. I didn't know these things existed until I started the work I do. I didn't know you existed, and places like this existed. So I think for all siblings who have gone through loss, that places like this exist, that we all exist. To repeat what you guys have said and shown me is that you're not alone, and there's a lot said in the unsaid too, and relating to each other is so powerful. So yeah, we'll leave with that. Thank you for sharing your stories and your siblings, and thank you for trusting me to listen to it all and be in this process. Yeah, and thank you, George Marks.
Thank you.
Wow. I mean, what an extraordinary discussion. And for me personally, and thank you to all of you that are still with us for this live Q&A. What struck me was certainly the amount of pain and the amount of healing that we just witnessed, and the ability to articulate it, and how important it is for parents, siblings, somebody who has a life-limiting diagnosis, to hear these really extraordinary perspectives. And I think we'll do is just start with the first question. We're here with Brittany, who we've just gotten to know pretty well, and Dr. Kathy Hull. After watching that, and Brittany, after being with those siblings who had similar experiences to yours, what's just one or two things that really you want to underscore? There's a lot of wisdom that was shared. Maybe starting with Kathy and then going to Brittany, like what's something that stuck out? What did you learn, or what were you reminded about, or just seems really important to underscore from this panel?
Watching the panel discussion, for me, I think the piece that felt the most significant was the power of community, and this group coming together and being able to be vulnerable together. And because they shared an experience, even though each one was unique to that family and that person, the underlying commonality of losing someone in your family gave so much meaning to their coming together and being able to support one another, to be that vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that greatly. I think too, there's so much said, like you said, Michael, there's so much wisdom shared. People might watch this back again or take it all in, but I think for me, it was that when I first met with the siblings on Zoom, as we prepped for this panel, I felt almost like an outer body experience of being with people who have shared this experience. It's not often that I sit with 5 other bereaved siblings and just talk honestly about what it feels and all of the waves, and just that I never really put as much power to that statement, "You're not alone," I think until that first time of meeting everyone. So to know that, like I said in the end, there's so much power in the unsaid, and so just to sit with people who have unfortunately, shared a difficult experience, it speaks many words without even using any at all.
And I imagine people viewing felt that sense of community. I did. I felt like you did a beautiful job of making the audience and whoever might be watching this feel included. So we've got some great viewer questions. I'm going to start with one of the first. And I'd love, Kathy, your thoughts on this as a clinician, and Brittany, your thoughts, as the director of Jacob's Heart, but also just, as a person who's been through this. But it's about parents showing emotion. And sometimes our parents in these experiences want to not, make sure they're not crying or expressing big emotions in front of the other children, or in front of, even the child that is struggling with an illness. So I'm wondering, what words do you have for parents about showing their emotions in front of their children, Kathy and Brittany?
Certainly from my experience, and I'm a little bit unique in that I have lost 2 siblings. And George Mark Children's House is actually named for my 2 brothers. And as I've said many times, doing this, meaning founding this and being connected to it now for 20 years, was such an enormous healing experience for our family and for my parents, to know that we were creating as a family a legacy for these 2 sons who, had died 7 years apart from each other. So it was like another tsunami coming in. And at our house, it was always safe to talk about the boys. But I will say, since George Mark was founded and their names are said out loud every day, that it has just made it that much easier and more comfortable. And much as the panel demonstrated, even though it has been many years since my brothers died, those tears are at the forefront. I mean, those memories are powerful and real. And I would say to parents, just let that conversation be an open one, and remember that missing person with the positives and the negatives. I was great for glorifying my brother Mark because he had died in an automobile accident, and I was just grieving his absence. And he was a twin, and my sister Marty said, "Don't you remember that he drove us crazy?" And that was so healthy. It was like, you're right, he did. He was a real pain. And that made him more real versus just culling the memories that made me sad. So I think it's all important, the good, bad, and just being open about it.
Yeah.
You called the good, bad, and annoying.
He was.
Yeah, I mean, I know we don't have much time, but we do that with my brother Corbin too. He was the youngest of all of us, and he was so critical of all of us. And so we do, it's a good thing to talk about, the parts of them that were annoying, or that drove you crazy, the parts of them that you loved, because it keeps them more real. I think from the question around parents' emotions, that's a huge thing to unpack, right? It depends on the age that you were, the loss, and then through every milestone, it's something different. I look at my mom now as I'm newly engaged, and I can see on her face the pain when I'm with all of my other siblings in the room. I can feel that sense of, as we're going into this very big moment for me, he's not there. And I celebrate my joy, and then I'm so quick to notice their emotion. But I have to say that it's comforting to me, because when I see her recognize it, I'm feeling similar. I'm celebrating this joyful milestone. I'm so grateful. I cannot wait to, marry my fiance, but my brother isn't here, and I'm feeling that. And so to see her, I'm not upset, or I don't feel an extra layer of responsibility. I feel a connection. I feel a safety. So to, second what Kathy is saying of being open about it, I think it took us a while to realize how to be open as that parent-child relationship about this loss. And I'm now, as getting older and as we're all growing, the more open about it with him I am, the more it eases that grief. You can never heal grief, I think, but you can ease it. And I know that's a pretty bold statement, but I think the connection with our parents' pain as we grow does help to ease it.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, the idea of kind of our ongoing relationship with somebody who has died, there's a lot of cultural messaging around grief that it's linear and get back to life, get back to normal. which we find in movies and in statements from our friends and in books, etc. Talk to me a little bit from both of your perspectives about this idea of having an ongoing relationship with the person that's died. We heard some of this in the panel, but specifically about, like, you know, that's a healthy thing, to celebrate those birthdays, to have them still be present in your life. There's nothing wrong with you, and there actually might be something right with you, if that's a part of your grieving process.
Sure. Well, I talk to George and Mark a lot. Just a running conversation. You know, I'll be driving along, or if I pull up in front of George Mark, I'm like, look at this, you two. You know, this is kind of exciting. And then I'll say, send money. That's my ongoing conversation with them. But I go sit at their graves, you know, and just reflect, have a conversation with them there. They're just so much a part of who I am. And I think that's part of the grieving process. Is I would never use the words get over it. Losing somebody that special isn't something you get over, but you can get on with your life and integrate that experience and have it give you meaning in your work and your relationships. And they certainly are a part of that. I always say out loud, I am one of 6 siblings, and 4 of us are alive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all real stuff. We talk about grief. It's like all the waves that come, and every moment is different. I think that it depends. I think everyone's experience is individual. I know for me, when I started at Jacob's Heart, it's been such an honoring experience, and it's been so radical at, you know, my relationship with my brother, who's no longer physically here, has changed. You know, someone told me grief is a long-term relationship, but if you're asking the question of that relationship being with that person, if I think about it like that, I'm like, wow, it really has changed with where I'm at in my life. Just like your long-term relationships change with your friends or your loved ones, you know, it's changed. And I think one of the things that I've learned greatly is that memorialization of your sibling or your loved one that has passed it's a massive part of easing your grief, like what you're saying, Kathy, and going to the gravesite and talking with them or constantly acknowledging them in your life. You know, I was a little afraid to do that all the time. But when I started working at Jacob's Heart and facing that every day, you know, I'm like, wow, my relationship to my brother is actually getting stronger the more I memorialize him, the more I boldly share about him, my family, and my own grief, and all for the why of honoring him and bringing hope to others. That's big. Like, that's a big thing. And so I'm constantly in observation of how my relationship changes with him, even though he's not here.
Beautiful. So let's talk about books that have been very helpful to you or were helpful when, you know, either of you were experiencing the loss of your brothers. And it could be books, it could be movies, artwork. What would you like to recommend as great resources in that world for siblings, since we're focused on siblings today, but also potentially parents?
I'm going to say that we will have to come up with a list that we can post, because I have a whole selection of books in my office that I really think are important and are valuable to our families. So rather than try to name one, I think we'll come up with a list and post it.
Yeah, I agree. I was about to say, whoa, that would take up a lot of time, because I know there's a lot. And I've recently discovered some, I think, blog posts that I really like, that just talk about grief in a very raw way. And, you know, it's not structured, it's just real. So I look forward to putting something together with Kathy. Lots of children's books that I've read about grief that I'm really impressed with and feel very moved by. So, yeah.
Great. Yeah, well then, and we'll send those lists. And also anybody who submitted a question that we haven't been able to get to, we're going to answer those questions via email in a follow-up. So if you've got 4 minutes left and you want to throw in a question, you will get an answer. It just might not be in the next 4 minutes. Since we are talking about grief and we're going to send out a list of books, are there any practices that come to mind that you have seen be really helpful, Kathy, for patients or for yourself, and Brittany for yourself, when you are feeling overwhelmed by grief? Is it nature? Is it meditation? Calling a friend? You know, we have people listening who might really want just a quick thought on what's a great practice.
You certainly named several that are helpful. For me, going for a walk somewhere by myself, if I'm really feeling like that, or I'll cry in the shower. I'll turn on the shower and just think, okay, I need 15 minutes to just be sad. And then I'll say to myself, but I don't have to be sad all day. And that's helpful too, to put a frame around it and give myself permission to come back to it if I need to. Like today's a really hard day. It's the day that Mark died in an automobile accident. So that day, you know, is a lot. But I can move myself from being totally despondent about the whole thing to saying, okay, I'm crying in the shower and now I'm going to get out, I'm going to go for a walk and do the things that feel healing to me. I have a very supportive family, which is a gift to be able to talk to people in my family, but also I really count on my friends, and they know that I've had a lot of loss in my life, and that if I say, shall we have a cup of coffee? Maybe it means let's have a glass of wine, really. And let's talk about the people in our lives that we're missing. So you really addressed a lot of it, Michael, in so many different ways that people can, you know, both express their grief and honor it in a positive way.
Yeah, you did speak to that a lot. I think I do a lot of practices because grief is so unknown and it takes on so many different identities at different stages in your life. Sometimes what I did the week before to help me doesn't necessarily feel the same the next week. But I think relationships with, you know, nature, the ocean is a big healer for me because it helps me identify my grief. At Jacob's Heart and just in my life, a big thing for me has been, you know, grief is like the ocean. The waves always look different. It ebbs and flows. Some are big, some are small. And it's like I feel like nature has given me something in it to relate to, even when I can't relate to maybe my friends or, you know, even my other siblings. So that's been a huge one. And a myriad of others, and having mentors in my life, having allies in my life that just know what I need in the moment, or just know that I'm calling to let it out or walk with me and I just cry and there's not much you can say, but just to be held, for my emotions to be held, and for, you know, just all that I am to be held, you know, metaphorically and physically. But yeah, I think the ocean has been my sacred little buddy through all of it.
Well, these are beautiful suggestions, and I'm sure they're resonating with people. So we're actually at time, and so I just want to thank you, Brittany, for your time today and your incredible effort and presence that you brought to that panel. I know how powerful it will be for people. Thank you. And Dr. Kathy Hull, for everything you do. And whether your name is George or Mark, I think that if you're moved by the George Mark House, you should definitely go to georgemark.org and send money, because the work is extraordinary, and they're not even telling me to say that. But I've been so moved by the work of the George Mark House and everybody that I've come into contact with there. And there's also the West Coast Pediatric Palliative Care Summit which is March 28th and 29th. And you can learn all about that at georgemark.org. And thanks for our producers who made this look so great, and the videographers and the panelists and everybody who showed up and shared their questions and thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.